Hello everyone, John the Morgile here, checking in for a new Flat Earth video for you. I hope you do enjoy it. So do not let the present life deceive you, and do not let the great deceiver, Satan, deceive you about God. Indeed, Satan is your enemy, so treat him as such. He only invites his followers into the blazing fire. That was an excerpt from the Quran. Of course, the Christian Bible also describes the fallen ones as deceivers, and warns us of a deception so great the whole world would be fooled by it. Even the very elect would be counted among the deceived, if such a thing were even possible. Both Islam and Christian traditions describe the devil as a deceiver and his minions as wolves in sheep's clothing. Liars. The fallen ones are cursed with the inability to speak the truth, and thus it becomes a necessity for them to deceive and seduce humankind. Short of full-on demonic possession, they appear to be unable to control people directly, and instead they can only influence us to stray from the path aligned to the will of the Most High. Part of the curse against the fallen ones who fell away from the Most High Creator long ago is their inability to create anymore, for the act of creation involves speaking truthfully, in a sense, and as it stands, they are only capable of twisting the truth and tangling the yarns of history, as opposed to creating new threads or planting new seeds. The Ball Earth deception appears to be an intentional campaign, meaning it didn't occur by accident or by some indirect cause. A campaign which spans generations and involves very few key people to perpetuate. For one thing, even when you tell people the truth about the Ball Earth and prove it to them that it is a lie, they don't even believe you, far from it. And in the event that you can convince someone of the truth, which is really not likely in a single conversation, but must actively be sought out at great cost by each individual, but even if that were to occur, most people simply will not try to tell anyone else about it. I mean, could you imagine the average pilot, school teacher, or say architect proclaiming that the earth is flat to his clients or to their boss? It simply isn't going to happen, historically speaking, and in this light, I dare say it is a miracle that so many people are experiencing the revelation involved with flat earth truth. The Ball Earth deception is inarguably the foundation for atheism, nihilism, and the overall YOLO attitude which permeates our modern culture. This equally insidious and ridiculous ruse didn't just fall out of the sky naturally, but was instead injected into our culture long ago, quite deliberately, and dramatically shapes our worldview and how we view ourselves and our neighbors. Infinite space and the insignificant spaceship Earth are among the premier critical elements of the cultural mold which shapes our modern worldview. This really isn't arguable. There clearly must be some important motivation behind this deception, as there always is some reason to lie to people, or in other words, people don't just lie to other people for no reason. And as with any other whodunit situation, if you look at who stands to gain the most as a result of some scandal, that will typically point you in the right direction.
Could it be Satan?
We all know that the average person rarely plans ahead for more than 5 or 10 years, and such plans usually only include their immediate families and maybe their descendants. Even the most diligent and privileged ones among us have a 50-year plan, and even they don't plan on affecting the overall culture long after they're dead and buried. While we might dream of providing a structure or a plan for our grandchildren, nobody is really capable of planning ahead 100 years down the line, to be sure. There's just too many variables, and frankly, once you're dead, who really gives a crap? Of course, we don't want to poison the environment or pollute too much and all that, but in terms of trying to affect the culture over long periods is akin to herding cats with a lawnmower. As such, it is all but impossible for an individual or even a well-coordinated family to realistically direct world affairs on a grand scale over the course of hundreds of years, but this is exactly what appears to have occurred with the Ball Earth deception. It's really quite amazing if you think about it. The fact that such a grandiose and ridiculous blunder has found its way into the mainstream scientific record as known fact beyond reproach and impervious to inspection, but it begs the question, who exactly is responsible for such an intricate and quite absurd lie making its way into the curriculum of all schools across the world and believed by everyone from prince to pauper, in spite of being so obviously wrong? Certainly, one single person is not responsible or even capable of being responsible for such an intricate hoax, and indeed, a family lineage could never claim responsibility for such a feat, regardless of how well-funded or motivated they may be. No, this deception must have originated from some powerful, well-connected group of provocateurs with a vested interest in steering civilization away from understanding our true origins and our relationship with the Most High Creator of all things. Certainly, the secretive orders like the Freemasons and other similar Kabbalistic cartels are the perfect delivery system for the Great Deception. The Freemasons are famous for playing both sides of a given conflict, which they often engineered or at least fomented to begin with, in order to achieve some long-term goals indirectly. For one example, during the 2004 presidential election, both the Republican George Bush and Democratic John Kerry nominees were bona fide members of Skull and Bones, an elite secret society which is at least incestual with Freemasonic orders abound. This secret society of so-called elite aristocrats infests the sordid ivy of Yale University, meaning they would have sworn oaths to protect and assist one another behind closed doors while pretending to be enemies during the presidential election. Here's a clip of a hidden camera that caught a Skull and Bones ritual on tape for the first time ever.
This evening, getting under the skin of the Ivy League, those 8 old, definitely distinguished colleges that are known for their ivy-covered buildings and their sometimes superior attitudes to other colleges and universities, which often gets under the skin of people who went elsewhere. Yale University is 300 years old this year, and were you to visit its campus, you would see that it still has exotic clubhouses, which look like tombs where Yale's legendary secret societies meet. Their prestige and importance have largely evaporated, but the rituals are still a secret. And so when we heard that some enterprising characters had managed to spy on the famous Skull and Bones Society, well, we couldn't resist. Here's ABC's Dan Harris.
The videotape provides a grainy glimpse into what appear to be the initiation rituals of a secret society that's been around since 1832, whose members have gone on to be leaders of Wall Street and the White House, the Senate and the Supreme Court.
They're sort of trying to scare the initiates, make them, disorient them, frighten them.
New York Observer investigative reporter Ron Rosenbaum accompanied a team of Yale students who shot these pictures 9 days ago. Rosenbaum's curiosity about Skull and Bones was permanently piqued when, as a classmate of George W. Bush, he lived right next to the Tomb, the group's heavily fortified home. From their perch, Rosenbaum and his cohorts taped the Tomb's courtyard. What they captured, they say, was initiates, known as neophytes, being forced to kiss a skull, then members performing a mock killing. It may look like your average fraternity nonsense, but Rosenbaum says it's not.
Even though it may seem silly to us, it seems to mean something to them, and you can't argue with the success of Skull and Bones.
True. Famous alums include senators John Kerry and John Chafee, to name 2, cabinet secretaries such as Averell Harriman, and 3 presidents, William Taft, George Bush, and George W. Bush, who's been reluctant to talk about Skull and Bones.
Does it still exist? The thing is so secret, I'm not even sure it still exists.
In recent years, by many accounts, the on-campus influence and allure of Skull and Bones has waned dramatically, and there is no proof that the rituals recently caught on videotape are the same ones performed by the current president. Still, Rosenbaum says the tape is a valuable artifact, an extremely rare view into the secret society that groomed the American ruling class for generations. Dan Harris, ABC News, New York.
That's our report on World News Tonight. Don't forget Nightline.
The Boston Tea Party was perpetrated by Freemasons who dressed up as Indians and dumped tea into the Boston Harbor in protest to paying taxes to the crown for such imports. Allegedly, that's what happened. Of course, the Declaration of Independence was produced largely by Freemasons, and the majority of U.S. presidents were deeply involved with the Masonic orders, with very few exceptions, if any. And this isn't just in America. This is a worldwide phenomenon. Freemasonic lodges have had their fingers in all the pies for a very long time. While the average neophytes of the Freemasonic orders are just normal people trying to make it, they provide cover and camouflage for the compromised, festering inner circle of the order. The newbies to Freemasonry, known as the Blue Lodge or the First 3 Degrees in Scottish Rite Freemasonry, act as sort of useful idiots, for they are misled by their superiors in the ranks into a false understanding of Freemasonry and their overall goals. However, they are also misled into believing that they have a firm grasp of said overarching plans and goals of the lodge. The Freemasons run their organizations from the top down, like a pyramid, where the controlling, powerful, so-called elites inhabit the upper echelons and dictate orders and mandates down to the lower levels of the organization, who follow orders unquestioningly and yet are not privy to the inner workings of the upper echelons above them. The fact that practically all astronauts who claim to have visited space have indeed been Freemasons is no surprise. Freemasons swear allegiance to their lodge above all other oaths, be it allegiances to a flag, a creed, or even a family. Even if they are, say, a police officer or elected official, they are first and foremost Freemasons, charged with protecting and serving the lodge above all other obligations, and they are expected to, again, lie, cheat, and steal, be it necessary, to further the goals of the lodge or to protect the integrity of their lodge or their brothers in the craft. It has been argued quite convincingly that the hierarchy of Freemasonry is, at the very top levels, run by entities who are simply not human, but are instead some supernatural or demonic forces sitting at the thrones of the world. All other hierarchies in this world are structured in a similar fashion as Freemasonry, as represented by a pyramid, where the power of the organization is housed at the pinnacle at the top, and the wealth and influence trickles down to the lower levels, which are compartmentalized and insulated from the upper echelons. This design of power structures allows a very few people at the top of each pyramid to control large numbers of people and resources below them in their respective pyramids of power. So we're not just referring to Freemasonry here, but the military, corporations, police departments, the entertainment industry, and etc., etc. Really, they're all set up as essentially pyramids of power, which are run at the top by a very small group of people who are, of course, extremely wealthy, powerful, and importantly, immune to public scrutiny, or the meat grinder, which we call the system, which all of us goyim must deal with on a regular basis. These movers and shakers, the leaders of the pyramids of power, appear on the surface to be separate, independent, even sovereign entities acting autonomously for their own personal best interest, but in reality, they are incestual bedfellows whose only fear is losing their advantage over the rest of the world, whom they consider to be cattle, lesser beings, deserving of nothing more than perpetual subservience. Now, while these pyramids of power appear on the surface to be separate, at the very top it does appear, behind closed doors, they are very much intertwined. Of course, people don't like to be controlled, so it is important to cast an illusion in order to control the masses of people by making them believe that they are in control. Give them an election that really isn't a choice. That's a good example.
You were both in Skull and Bones, the secret society.
It's so secret we can't talk about it.
What does that mean for America? The conspiracy theorists are going to go
I'm
on.
sure they are. I don't know. I haven't seen the web.
Number 322?
First of all, he's not the nominee, and look, I look
Are
forward.
you prepared to lose?
No, I'm not going to lose.
You both were members of Skull and Bones, a secret society at Yale. What does that tell us?
Not much, because it's a secret.
Is there a secret handshake? Is there a secret code?
I wish there were something secret I could manifest.
322, a secret number?
There are all kinds of secrets, Tim, but one thing is not a secret. I disagree with this president's direction that he's taking the country. We can do a better job, and I intend to do it.
And we'll be watching. Be safe on the campaign trail. John Kerry, thanks for joining us. And we'll be right back.
My next guest is a man who needs no introduction. He is the host of Sunday news program Meet the Press. His newest book, sure to be another bestseller, Wisdom of Our Fathers by Tim Russert, out just in time for Father's Day. Tim Russert, thanks for joining us on Deadline Live.
A real pleasure to be here.
You know, one question. I met you in Boston, by the way, and you gave me a very enthusiastic handshake, and you're a great guy to meet in person. I was working with Fox News at the Democratic National Convention. A question I've always wanted to ask you, Tim, before we get to the book. You asked a question that no establishment media person ever asked of the president and the runner-up in 2004, and that was their involvement in a group called Skull and Bones 322. I got to know, Tim, why did you ask them that question? What were you getting at?
Well, both George W. Bush and John Kerry were involved in college in this fraternity, secret society, whatever, and part of the code that they subscribed to was that they would never talk about it with others other than members. And I was very curious as to how they would react to a question about it. Whether they would come clean and acknowledge, or whether they would hold to their college code. It just fascinated me, and I think it gives us some insight into each of them. And they both were honorable to their code. They wouldn't give up much information.
Sure were.
Yeah.
What would you have done if they would have gone on to tell you that they do these bizarre rituals and that it is an extension of a German death cult? Would that have dropped your jaw? I guess you didn't expect that.
Well, it may have ended their campaign.
Yeah, and that really kind of shows us kind of what we have with our candidates, huh? Both coming from Eastern establishment schools, both out of Yale, both members of the secret society. It kind of gives us an idea here that we don't have much of a choice who's our president.
Example. It's imperative to their power structure that they be deceived and never learn the truth about the current order of things in this world, which are obviously contrary to the laws of God and the laws of nature. The masses must be completely deceived about everything, starting with the very ground that they walk upon. Is it possible that this insidious structure of deception did not originate just from some greedy men trying to create a buffer between themselves and the unwashed masses abound, but instead crafted by the very adversary which the ancient religions have warned us about? The fallen angels, powerful spiritual entities created by God as servants and messengers who, at some point in time, rebelled against the Creator as a result of being deceived by their own pride. Honestly, this sort of story, allegorical or otherwise, actually makes a lot of sense in the context of exactly whom would have the wherewithal, the motive, and the ability to facilitate such an elaborate and obviously absurd lie against the entire human race, for hundreds of years even. Honestly, this is just unthinkable to consider regular people going to such lengths on their own volition. Indeed, it appears we're not dealing with regular people who, as mentioned earlier, are hard-pressed to tell you exactly what they'll be doing next month, let alone in 10 years, not to mention controlling the volatile and fickle tides of time and culture across hundreds of years, with a policy that human beings are inferior and thus subservient beasts of burden who exist at the pleasure of an elite few. It is true that the secret societies like Freemasonry, the Skull and Bones, the OTO, the Bilderbergs, and legions of similar secretive brotherhoods are the most likely vehicles through which the ball earth deception was delivered and perpetuated. Indeed, we find the ranks of astronauts teeming with Freemasons, just as you find them in all key positions of power and influence in this world. Of course, the majority neophytes, the lower portions of the pyramidal power structures of Freemasonry, are simply not privy to the inner workings and the truth about the deception and our true origins and purpose, which has been hidden from us for our entire lives and for generations prior to our births. So, for example, at an organization like NASA, who are first and foremost charged with faking space and tricking everyone into believing that they're up in space doing science, only about 1% or less than 1% of NASA's payroll are in on the hoax. The way that they're set up, compartmentalized, with each unit doing its own work, not privy to the big picture, makes it so that, your Uncle George, who designs toilet seats for the ISS, isn't in on the hoax. I'm sure he did design the toilet seat for the ISS. They probably even built the toilet seat. The problem is it's not up orbiting the Earth, taking crap from the astronauts. The devil's empire is built on deception and seduction, and it's fueled by ignorance and arrogance. When we begin to expose the unbelievably complex and intricate webs spun by the fallen and perpetuated by the secretive orders a la Freemasonry, echoed in the culture ubiquitously, we find these deceptions to be deeply and inherently interwoven into the underpinnings of our modern paradigm, as well as our moral lexicon. It's no wonder that we live in a society filled with injustices, contradictions, and a seemingly unnecessary gauntlet of bitterness and strife set up against the average person. Our cultural paradigm is built upon a foundation of utter deception and demonic seduction, so it's no surprise there, right? For example, the diesel engine was built in the mid-1800s to run on peanut oil as opposed to so-called fossil fuels. The internal combustion engine, which runs on petroleum or gasoline, was designed long after the diesel engine was already in all sorts of applications without the need for so-called fossil fuels, and yet we find ourselves societally addicted to the allegedly non-renewable resource which is poisoning our waters and our air. It's no secret that the burning of fossil fuels is simply not sustainable, as it is claimed to be a non-renewable resource. However, it is less widely known that the deep reservoirs of oil, which were said to have been tapped dry back in the 1980s, have actually replenished themselves in more recent years. The ball Earth simply cannot support such things, as it is a finite and closed system. However, the scarcity of oil is good for business, so the people who bring us big oil have a vested interest in oil shortage crises, even if it's just a perceived shortage. At any rate, the social surge towards preventing climate change and finding an alternative to oil is a charade, for we could have completely avoided our worldwide addiction to quote-unquote fossil fuels altogether by simply using the diesel with peanut oil, which is of course a renewable resource. Not to mention the exhaust from running diesel engines on peanut oil is non-toxic. Certainly not the poisonous greenhouse gases released by running internal combustion engines on petrol. Not to mention now people run their diesel engines on petrol and pay out the ass for it when they could have just been running them on peanut oil the entire time. So what chain of events had to happen in order to arrive at the future? And 2022 is indeed the future, right? This future where more than 90% of municipal water supplies are laced with the developmental neurotoxin known as sodium fluoride. And even though people have been begging and pleading for years to have it pulled from their tap water, the fluoridation of our water towers continues, completely unimpeded and indeed accelerating. You see, they, whomever the hell they are, paid a panel of Ivy League dentists to form a committee of experts called the ADA, or American Dental Association, to basically become cheerleaders for, they actually became prostitutes for fluoridation of the tap water under the guise that it might whiten your teeth to rinse your mouth out with it. Of course, this whole stunt was a scam paid for and engineered by the aluminum manufacturers of the world, who have a huge liability in safely disposing of the sodium fluoride, which is a toxic byproduct of manufacturing aluminum. It apparently costs a fortune to safely store and dispose of sodium fluoride after creating the aluminum, so the ADA whores created the pseudoscientific hoax, which placed fluoride on some retarded and fictitious pedestal where it still sits to this very day. Pseudoscience won the day when it came to sodium fluoride and the shtick that it might whiten your teeth. The truth is, fluoride is a neurotoxin, and it accumulates deep in the body over time, essentially poisoning us and dumbing us down. not just by drinking toxic waste, but by bathing in it, washing your car and washing your pets in it, cooking with it, putting it in your Kool-Aid and your tea, etc., etc. The ADA stooges and their prostitutes pulled off a hoax using the perceived prestige of scientism to cement their absolute bullshit into the textbooks of every school across the land, and it is still taught to dentists to this day that fluoride is good for the teeth, but evidently only if you bathe in it too and drink it all the time, instead of maybe having the option to have fluoride in your toothpaste, which practically all toothpastes include fluoride anyways. It is also somehow necessary to drink it, put fluoride in your stew and your Kool-Aid and your homemade sweet tea, and don't forget to bathe in fluoride and also brush your teeth with it too. The fact that institutionalized scientism is able to pull off such a devastating, evil, and intricate scam spanning multiple generations across all continents is equal parts terrible and amazing at once. It leaves one to wonder exactly what sort of monster is responsible for such anti-human policies. Even the aluminum manufacturers of America can't be that evil, can they? But it's really no surprise when we see it through the lens of the Ball Earth deception. You see, part of the Ball Earth deception was to replace the traditional ancient religions with a new religion called Scientism, which is a lame and impotent caulk nozzle hiding behind practical applications of real science in order to slip its agenda through the back door. For example, we all know that our cell phones cannot work without the aid of satellites in space, so the fact that cell phones work is touted as proof positive of NASA's endeavors in space. Of course, the same technological functions purportedly fulfilled by satellites in space are equally achieved by thousands of miles of ultra-bandwidth undersea cables and probably millions of high-altitude weather balloons, which comprise the infrastructure to support the functionality of cell phones, GPS, and etc. without the need for one single satellite in space. The Ball Earth paradigm created a climate where scientists in white lab coats are trusted and believed above all else, and they can convince the world of anything so long as it's presented in such a way that it suggests it's supported by science. Not actual scientific experiment, but just the word science, or scientific sounding jargon, and this attitude continues to permeate the culture. An attitude that the persona of settled science trumps and dismisses any argument against the establishment of scientism. And by merely claiming that some concept is backed by science, relinquishes one's need to diligently confirm anything. For example, if you argue against the theory of evolution, which honestly can't stand up against logical, skeptical scrutiny for a second, but if you do argue against it, you are automatically labeled a religious fanatic and a science denier. Of course, when you dig deep into the topic, you'll find that the road to evolutionary science is paved with pseudoscience and bullshittery so thick you can practically scoop it out with an ice cream ladle. If you argue against the Big Bang Theory, you're automatically labeled as a dogmatic nutcase who doesn't understand science, in spite of quite compelling and cogent arguments to support the concept of intelligent design. Instead of logically arguing against such positions, the incumbent pontificates of scientism merely need to point and laugh, and their minions will autonomously parrot them, dismissing and ignoring any valid argument against their established shtick, carved in stone science. They need not consider what you are saying or even listen to what you have to say, because you're clearly a troglodyte, going against the doctrines of established science, which has been given carte blanche authority over the belief systems of so many people. The essence of science is, of course, to question everything and skeptically scrutinize long-standing theories, using essentially the process of elimination to only make claims you can support with evidence, and to formulate your estimation of the world around you based on the physical evidence in front of you. If a person refuses to consider some theory or alternative way of looking at things, they are in opposition of science. If you refuse to skeptically question the prevailing theories of the day, that is the opposite of science. So with that, we're going to wrap this one up. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you like this video and you want to help us continue making content, please consider becoming a channel supporter. Links in the description. Thank you guys so much for watching. God bless you, and we'll see you in the next video. As always, spread the word, spread the world, and peace out, everybody.